Yeah, let's roll again. Okay, hey, Jay, good to be back with you again today.
Yeah, how you doing, Paul?
Yeah, not bad. I'm ready to go. Romeo and Juliet, Act 5, is that where we are?
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to it because I really think we're in a good place. I think that these two kids in love are surrounded by supportive adults, and really, can't imagine anything going wrong.
No, not at all. This is going to end beautifully. I'm looking forward to just one of those lovely, satisfying endings that make you feel good at the end.
Absolutely.
And happy about being in love yourself and about being alive. Well, we'll dive in, but before we do, Jay, we can't start without a poem. Do you have a poem for us today?
Yeah, I was thinking of this poem by E.E. Cummings, one of my favorite love poems. And, I know by Act 5, the lovers we're focused on are strained and separated and exiled from each other. And so this poem probably speaks more to the ideal of what they dream of than what they're actually experiencing. But I just really love the message of the poem.
Yeah.
So it's an E.E. Cummings poem entitled, Since Feeling is First. Since feeling is first, who pays any attention to the syntax of things will never wholly kiss you. Wholly to be a fool while spring is in the world. My blood approves, and kisses are a better fate than wisdom. Lady, I swear by all flowers, don't cry. The best gesture of my brain is less than your eyelids flutter, which says we are for each other. Then laugh, leaning back in my arms, for life is not a paragraph, and death, I think, is no parenthesis. So actually that last line is kind of a good link, but did I spoil the end of Romeo and Juliet just now?
No, it's all right, Jay. I think people know. People know. I'm sorry. I think they know.
They just have to read the first 10 lines of the prologue today.
Yeah, let's not forget.
Okay, good point.
The whole thing is.
Was I supposed to read the play? Because I just watched the Leonardo DiCaprio movie.
No, that's fine. That's got it all. It's just fine. It's fine.
All right.
Life is not a paragraph. Death is no parenthesis.
Isn't that nice? Oh man.
Yeah, that's really nice. Yeah, I think our two characters in Romeo and Juliet get beyond the language of love and function on the intensity of the feeling of love, which I kind of actually want to talk about when we dive into this here today. Well, all right, we're at 5-3. We've gone. We did an episode on sort of an overall thing, and then we've dived into each of the 5 acts or each of the 4 acts. Today's Act 5 and the end. There's only 3 scenes in this act. Scene 2, super short. Scene 3, kind of long. But we're there, and I want to continue on with our 3 questions too. Mm-hmm. What's obvious and essential in Act 5? What's subtle but poignant? And then what lingering or nagging questions do you have after you close the book on this play? What what hangs on? And I don't know, it feels like a bigger question at this point at Act 5 than even
totally
the other acts. Yeah. Almost overwhelming. All right, so let's go. Let's get there. Obvious and essential. Where does this play? Where does Act 5 open up, Jay? Just to remind us.
It opens up after Juliet fakes her death, and the musicians show up, and there's that scene I talked about on the last podcast.
That's right.
The plan has begun to be enacted. Juliet takes the potion. Mm-hmm. There's the plan for Friar Lawrence to send a messenger to Mantua to tell Romeo of the plan, so Romeo and Friar Lawrence can meet in the cave, rescue Juliet, who will wake up. And really, we have fake deaths, drugs, right, and illegal crossing of border. What could possibly go wrong, right? Right? And no parent permission slips. The parents are not involved with
There's none of that.
So as dads of teenagers, this is
this is bad.
Man, it's a different read when you're a parent. But anyway, I was telling my mother recently, and I said it. I hope I said it more nicely than this.
Right.
But I said something like, parenting now is harder than any parenting you did.
How'd that go over?
And I love my mom and we're close. But what I
Yeah.
meant was she could actually tell us to leave the house at 8 a.m. and come back at 5 at night and just presume the world would care for us.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, I was in a neighborhood where that could happen, and she was right, and she was an amazing working mom. But no, there's something visceral, and maybe this can be a separate podcast, but there's something visceral when your life changes that the books you read change. And one of the things I think in Romeo and Juliet is when I first read it as a kid, thinking about the parents was not on my radar screen. Thinking even about adult mentors.
No, they're totally absent, right? From your mind.
Because they're not as interesting as Romeo and Juliet,
Right.
obviously.
Right.
So anyway, I don't want to get in a tangent on
but
that,
you absented them from your own relationships, right? Like in any kind of love or flirtatious relationship that you had, your parents weren't involved, in that. So the same thing. If you're trying to identify, if you're trying to,
they were a ride to the mall.
Yeah,
that's pretty much what they were.
Just functionaries.
Yep.
They don't matter. The whole time the mall was the thing.
Yeah. So I don't know. I've just rereading and discussing this with you. It's been interesting to think of how where one is in life actually alters the nature of reading.
Right.
It really does. And that's not a hokey line. I think it's just the case.
No, it is. And it holds up. Like I'm still interested in reading it, even though I'm not, a 14-year-old going to the mall, which I did quite a lot, whenever I was 14. There was this really big mall in Winston-Salem, not that far from my house. In Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where we went. It was just great. Haynes Mall.
I remember a line from Family Ties. Remember that show from the 80s?
Yeah.
Where Michael J. Fox's character tells his sister, who lives at the mall, she said, "I don't go to the mall that much," and he's like, "The mannequins wave to you." I'll never forget. So I didn't go that much, but no. So this evolves, and I was just thinking of a lot of my thoughts about this play when I taught it in the last couple of months. I didn't want to teach it like a dad, only because I'm teaching 14-year-olds looking at it for the first time.
Right.
But I don't know. I think it's surprising how interested kids are in the perspective of older people, because I think they all want to be older, or at least treated like they're older.
Right.
So anyway.
Right. Or at least smarter. There's something like that. They want to be smart.
Yeah.
Well, I feel that in the class. I don't know. Obvious and essential then? I mean, what is obvious in Act 5? What is obvious in Act 5? Something about that cracks me up.
The color of the walls. No. What do you want to go first?
They're blood red. Yeah, I don't know. I wrote down for my notes for today, obvious and essential, is that Romeo and Juliet's deaths are tragic. They're actually tragic. This is a tragedy. It's categorized amongst the tragedies, right? So maybe it's obvious to say that their deaths are tragic. But it struck me that, if it's obvious, then it's also essential. It's essential to know that their deaths are tragic. And I do want to dig in on that because I have a related point for my subtle but poignant.
Yeah.
I always look back over Aristotle's sort of breakdown of the tragedy and the rules. He has these hard and fast rules for tragedy. And they sort of work for Romeo and Juliet. I think one of the things that he says is that your main character or characters, they're not bad. They're not a bad person. They're not a vicious person, because if a vicious person falls to a low state, that's satisfying. You want that to happen. That's not tragic. That sounds like justice.
Right.
So Romeo dials in about where Aristotle wants him to, which is not as a great or perfect person or person of great character, but a person of, moderately good character, has some flaws. And the tragedy rests in some kind of tragic or some kind of weakness, I guess I should say, not some lack of character or not some, obsession with vice or something like that. And Romeo does. I think it's his passion. His passion leads to his mistakes. His passion with Tybalt, he gets wrapped up, kills him. His passion with really the death of Juliet. I was struck rereading this that he asks no questions. When he finds out, when Balthazar reports to him, I saw her later too. Really? She died? Like, what happened?
Right.
Was she struck by lightning? Was she hit by a car?
Right.
Like, there are no questions. He does ask, were there no letters from Friar Lawrence? Okay, which is a nod to that.
Yeah.
But then he says, no matter. Balthazar says no. Yeah, he's like, yeah, whatever.
Right,
and then he just moves on. It's just a throwaway question. And he moves on. Immediately he goes to the fates, right? He's like, well, thus I refute these stars. I mean, he's not living on this planet, anymore. He's in, fate is, has positioned itself against me, and I'm going to fight to win. But he doesn't ask one of those basic questions like, really, is she dead? What happened? What'd she die of? Nothing like that. Nothing like that shows up. And then but then Juliet, who is different, I think is strikingly different in this end. She's dead too, but her death is completely different, and I think she makes a very calculated decision to die, in which she does the math and realizes that it's not worth being alive anymore if Romeo's not there. So she knows the conditions under which life is no longer worth living, which is actually a frightening calculation to be able to make.
It's weird that they teach this to kids.
What's that?
Isn't it weird? I mean, for years I was on the admissions committee, and I'd see their reading lists, and a lot of middle school 7th and 8th graders read this. And I think of all the parts you'd have to skip. The first 2 pages, absolutely. Well, yeah. But what you're saying, it's a pretty dark vision.
It's a really dark vision.
The notion of what you're saying about the fact that the end is tragic. Whilst that seems like table stakes, like obviously it's a tragedy, but the nature of what that means and looks and sounds and feels like.
Oh, yeah, you're right. And I think I only teach it confidently because I have no confidence that the students in the room will really figure out what we're talking about. Like they'll never come around to what Juliet has come around to, like the conditions under which life is not worth living.
She's one of those many Shakespeare characters that's smarter than most of us, and it's okay.
Oh yeah,
and it's okay. Like we have to just be okay with it.
Right, and be instructed by it.
Right.
But I have no doubt. I don't think any of my students are ever going to learn what she has to teach them.
And it might be just planting seeds so that this is a play that if it's ever produced at their college, they go see, or their town, or the town they live, the city they live near. Like, I think the first bounce on a lot of these classic texts is a first bounce. And it's to not be scared by it, to enter it in an interesting, substantive way, to have good conversations, to write something coherent. But man,
that's exactly.
I don't want to be judged by my first reading of any of these kind of books.
Yeah, no, and that is exactly how I teach this and all the classics, as not as their, and this takes a great deal of pressure off, and it changes the way you approach the text, which I think is a good approach. That this is not the student's only or last approach to the text. Mm-hmm. If it is, that's okay. We will have done substantive things, so I can be proud of what we've done. Mm-hmm. However, it also is strong groundwork for a second reading, like a second solid, like academic reading. The class. So I totally agree. I totally agree with that. And it lays the groundwork for an even more serious reading. And that was one of the things, which I discovered as a graduate student, being in class with students who had better high school educations than I had. Mm-hmm. And I was struck by how they engaged with the text. And I would break off into these small, study groups, with these students. I was in a philosophy master's degree program. And I discovered that this was not, whatever text we were reading, this was in many cases not the first time they'd been through this text. And for me, in a lot of cases, it was the first time. Take the Nicomachean Ethics. Some of these students had it, in high school. They had that teacher. So I do think of this as that, like you said, Jay, is laying down a layer, a first layer. Excuse me. For the text. So their deaths are tragic. I would say the tragic flaw or the weakness, the frailty, thy name is woman. We're reading Hamlet. Hamlet says that.
It's the opposite in Romeo and Juliet.
It is the opposite in Romeo. Frailty, thy name is Romeo in Romeo and Juliet.
That's good. That's good.
Absolutely. And for Juliet, it's something even deeper than that. An awful realization, But I don't know. Their deaths are tragic. That's the obvious. I think you have to dig into that. That's the obvious but essential. And however you dig into that with your students, it's important to do, you know, to show that this is a tragedy and this is the apex, you know, of the tragedy or the resolution, the catastrophe of the tragedy. You know.
Yeah. That's really good. I was struck in my reviewing of Act 5 in the last several days of the last words of each character. So if you wouldn't mind I'm just hoping to just revisit them.
Yeah, I want to go to the text. That's good.
So Act 5, Scene 3, line 88 is, it's sad. In no film or stage productions do you get Romeo killing Paris. Not that I'm out for more blood.
Yeah.
The mean, real, cruel part of me is excited to see Paris go because he's such like a boring, vapid character. So Paris he can't beat Romeo in a fight. Yeah. So he lays Paris in the tomb, and this is line 88 or so. So this is Romeo soliloquizing. How often when men are at the point of death have they been merry, which their keepers call a lightning before death. Oh, how may I call this a lightning? Oh, my love, my wife, death that hath sucked the honey of thy breath hath had no power yet upon thy beauty. I think of my mother was a geriatric nurse for 40 years, nursing homes, right? How often she saw husbands and wives hold the hands of a recently dead spouse looking at them, thinking this.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
Thou art not conquered. Oh God, it's so sad. Beauty's ensign yet is crimson in thy lips and in thy cheeks, because she just recently died, right? And death's pale flag is not advanced there. Tybalt, liest thou there in thy bloody sheet? So you get him kind of not improvising, but he's looking around, and of course they're in the family tomb, so Tybalt's there. Tybalt, liest thou there in the bloody sheet? Well, what more favor can I do thee than with that hand that cut thy youth in twain to sunder his that was thine enemy? Forgive me, cousin. Dear Juliet, now he's back to her. Dear Juliet, why art thou yet so fair?
Yeah.
Shall I believe that and then it gets creepy. Shall I believe that unsubstantial death is amorous, and that the lean abhorred monster keeps thee here in dark to be his paramour? Will death take you as a lover?
Right.
For fear of that, I still will stay with thee, and never from this palace of dim night depart. I'm going to protect you from death itself.
Right.
As a lover. Here will I remain with worms that are thy chambermaids. And I was wondering whether Andrew Marvell into His Coy Mistress stole that. I have to look that up.
Yeah.
Worms shall try thy virginity. I think that's the line from that poem. And I don't map that out for my students because I don't get paid enough.
No,
that's
no.
a drawing on the board that I'm not qualified.
Yeah,
but anyway. So
I would want to do that.
Stick figures is all I have.
Yeah, at a conference or something.
Right.
You've been paid to present that.
Oh, here will I set up my everlasting rest and shake the yoke of inauspicious stars from this world-wearied flesh. No. Eyes, look your last. Arms, take your last embrace. And lips, O you, the doors of breath, seal with a righteous kiss, a dateless bargain to engrossing death. He then dies at the end. So he gets this long speech, and I want to read that because Juliet's speech does not take a long time. We know Romeo dies. He takes the poison. Juliet awakes. And
that's like line 75 to line 120. That's a long speech.
He has a while to think through things, to notice things, to wonder, to ask questions, to answer the questions, to comment on her again, to follow up on the comment. So in 166, Act 5, Scene 3, Juliet, who unfortunately hasn't been reading Romeo and Juliet, which to me is the greatest tragedy in the tragedies, is they don't get a copy of the play.
And they were cheap back then too, right? The copies, they weren't that expensive.
It depends.
Well,
yeah.
All right. Is it quarto or a...
Yeah, what's here? A cup closed in my true love's hand. Poison I see hath been his timeless end. So she's just reporting news right away. Churl drunk all and left no friendly drop to help me after. I will kiss thy lips. Haply some poison yet doth hang on them to make me die with a restorative. She kisses him. Mm-hmm. So literally no thinking there. She's just waking up from 42 hours of oblivion. So she's not thinking yet.
Right.
And then Juliet, yea noise, then I'll be brief. Oh happy dagger, this is thy sheath, meaning her very body. There rust and let me die. Now, what the heck? So throughout the whole play.
Okay.
I'm not saying Romeo is not thoughtful. I mean, I think you and I have made the point over and over again that Juliet as a thinker is infinitely more layered than Romeo as a thinker.
Right.
So I don't know if one can consider this a flaw in the writing.
Okay.
And I always tell my students, if you have a critique of a great author, it's totally okay.
Right. Do it.
Mm-hmm. And actually, I remember one of my professors in college asserting that Shakespeare's fatal flaw was his inability to end plays convincingly. That beginning and the middle are great, but he often needs a forced thing at the end. So I just find it weird that Romeo gets the substantive thinking at the end. Juliet reacts to her environment and stabs herself. And it looks like if let's imagine it's 1590, when did this come out? 1596, something like that?
Right.
And let's imagine you're in the theater and you're paying really close attention. And let's imagine we're able to, through some magic of technology, pause life. And you and I were, I don't know, Glovers in London in 1596. Right. And I read to you magically from a script Romeo's speech. I changed some of the pronouns, right?
Right.
All you have is the 4X.
Right.
And I read Romeo's last words and I ask you, who says these, Romeo or Juliet? What would you say? Juliet. Every time.
Right. Right.
Juliet thinks like that. So I'm fascinated by, and I don't know what the answer is Romeo a better thinker because he's known Juliet for a couple weeks? Is this just what was expected, that the guy would have the thoughts at the end? I don't see Shakespeare falling into those cliche traps.
I don't either.
I don't at all.
Yeah, he's not.
Or is
trapped.
it the way death is happening? Like Romeo buying a poison, knowing he's kind of doing this, whereas Juliet is surprised. So it all happens. I actually don't have like a set answer. I'm fascinated by the fact that Romeo uses a cup, which is pretty traditionally female. Juliet uses a dagger, pretty traditionally male.
That's right.
I think it's an incredibly messy, weird, surprising, and I don't know if I should criticize it or just be impressed, but I don't know.
Right.
This to me is like, would be a really good conversation with students, that if you're tracing these two people over the play, it seems like there's a weird adjustment made at the end.
I think so.
And I don't know what to do with it, Paul, to be honest.
Yeah, I think so. And a little bit, I can't say that any of my students have noticed some of these things exactly. But I totally agree with you. In rereading it, I almost put it down as my subtle but poignant, is that like Romeo almost seems transformed right, as an actor. As soon as he gets the news that Juliet is dead, suddenly he is a man in the world. Like he is in charge and is motivated. And like read the apothecary scene. Yeah. You know, he's totally in charge. He tells him what to do at the end. Come on, take the money, man. You're starving to death.
Which is kind of a Juliet move.
Yes, that's right. Only Juliet has been that sort of an operator, and that confident and at ease in the world.
Yeah, I like
and then
that.
when he talks to Balthazar, he's like, if I see you in here, I'll rip you limb from limb. Like he's completely like You would just walk away from this guy. You knew he was on, and this is his moment. I agree. We haven't seen this. We haven't seen this from Romeo before. Where did this come from?
Yeah. So that's what I think always, and it's a bit of an obvious thing. But you talked about the end being tragic, which some may say is obvious, but as you explained, there's lots of meat to that.
Yeah.
And my obvious thing is, what are the last words of the tragic character? So it's kind of connected. They're always interesting. It's always interesting to see how Macbeth dies, how Hamlet dies, how Coriolanus dies, how Romeo and Juliet die.
Right.
I'm fascinated by it, and I'm mystified by the end. I don't have kind of a thesis to say.
Right.
I'm thinking about it, and I'm fascinated by the fact that there seems to be a role reversal.
I agree, and I have to admit that I have a memory from undergraduate of hearing some professor, whoever, I'm not even sure who, say this, and so it's not an original thought, but exactly what you're saying, that Romeo dies in a stereotypically female way, and Juliet dies in a stereotypically. I don't know if I would have observed that, if I had been on my own.
Sure.
But it's true, so there's more going on. It's not a throwaway scene, which it might have been. I have some thoughts about that for the subtle, but poignant, which we can get into, but. I think those are kind of obvious in the sense that they're on the table. They're the things that you read, and they're in front of your face, and you need you need to deal with. And I think you can invite students into some of those things. At the very least.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I think they're interested in role reversal, gender role reversal. Like they're interested in that. Like it's a fun game to play.
I think too that I think if anybody listening to this is a teacher, I'm sure you know this already, that anytime we say I don't know, it's such a gift to kids.
Yes,
because
that's right.
What it often means is you're actually thinking beyond writing quizzes for them. You're actually thinking about these people as people,
right?
And that you're reading text with enough complexity that you can't solve them real easily,
right?
Not unlike regular humans.
Mm-hmm. And it invites them into that thing, like various people who've talked about this, from Alan Bloom, to Harold Bloom, to other people whose last names aren't Bloom. This great conversation, like this is a thing you're allowed to talk about. Not only allowed, but I think teachers like Jay, like yourself and me, we want them to. Like we want them to break out of the sort of mold of the student or whatever, and start just talking about it like they talk about things at lunch, or only it's Romeo and Juliet.
Sure.
So I like that. I like that invite, and I think being able to say, I'm not sure exactly, and give some reasons, invites them into it, without, on the other hand, breaking it, completely open, where you say something ghastly like,
sure,
it's all just opinion anyway. There's nothing here. That's not true.
No, because there's certain things that aren't in the book, and you can't make them. You can't put them there.
No. And I always tell my students opinion. I really, having read Plato as much as I have, I can't leave opinion alone.
Right.
Everyone has opinions, but not all of your thoughts are opinions. I always say, if you have reason, some explanation, some proof, some argument coupled with a claim rescues your claim from mere lowly, pathetic opinion.
And it isn't magical. It's go to the book. The book is where it lives.
That's right. And that's exactly where exactly. That's the next move. Okay, so where do
let the book work for you? It's the greatest. It's one other gift is, it's not your job to do all the work. Shakespeare, it turns out, was really good. And if you just go hunting for moments where his character's doing interesting things, that'll give you plenty to go on.
Yeah, that's right. And that's where I want to drive them. There's many places you can go. And as adults, you start to reach outside of the books, But I think the starting point is
starting point has to be the book.
It's got to be in there, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I want to drive them back to the lines, back to the quiddities of the book. What actually happened, and make them talk about it. Well,
subtle points.
Yeah, I mean,
surprising points.
The subtle points. I have a report from my own students. I think I know what they would say. And they have said year over year what the subtle point is. On the years that I've had a successful take on this, which isn't every year, but when I've had a successful class on this, many of them come around to the subtle point. And this is a nice point, although I think they're wrong, so I don't agree with it. But they throw out there, many of them are really bothered that Juliet ends up dying. Right? Now, this is really cool, right? Like, I do some things to try to make them choose, like, which is the culminating act of the scene. Is it Romeo's death or is it Juliet's death?
Yeah.
And maybe that's artificial. Maybe but by doing that, it makes them argue over something that is a hair splitting, that's really difficult.
Yeah.
But when I even suggest that, I point them in that direction, they often insist that Juliet did not have to die. Like, they see Romeo as this sort of emotional, out of control person who's very likely to die. Like, he stops off at the apothecary. Sure. It's all planned. You know what's going to happen. He's
very different than Juliet's death. Absolutely.
Exactly. Even to get them to say that, Jay, or to realize that at some level,
great.
And not throw it in the same bucket,
it's great.
Is an achievement.
Yeah.
But they're really bothered, which I think is correct. They're bothered that Juliet dies. Like, Romeo sees her. He's just blundering through. He doesn't even stop long enough. Even though I think it's ironic. He says, I'm going to untether myself from the fates. He says he's shaking the yoke of the inauspicious stars, right?
Yeah.
Right. So he's going to get himself out from the control of bad luck, because he's going to take control. And then, he just falls into the hands of luck, right?
Right. He's stars. That's you could do a deep dive on the role of fate, stars, star alignments, star crossed. A few times in the play, Juliet says of Romeo, not long after she meets him, when he die, cut him out into little stars, and it'll make the face of heaven shine so bright that we won't fall in love with Garrus Day or something like that. Yeah. So that notion, it's just throughout the play. It is. And
There's
so many reasons we read this guy.
Yeah, he's almost like that is the character that Romeo is fighting against. I think is Stars, and Juliet is not. I think she's really different because she's not fighting against fate, or Friar Lawrence says, the heavens have plotted against us a plot that's more powerful than we are, or something like that.
Yep.
That's beyond our control. So my students are really bothered by Juliet's death because they think when she wakes up and sees Romeo's death, she has a choice that Romeo did not have. And I think they see, and I'm sure I'm leading them in this direction a little bit, but I hope they're picking up on it too, that Juliet's a radically different character. She's ideal in the sense that she has passion, but she also has reason that she couples along with passion. She's like the romantic ideal, really, of these two, both in hand, which I'm sure we'll talk about, Jay, at some point in the future when we get to romanticism.
Yep.
And they think that essentially, so in the end, they think the subtle but poignant point is that Juliet did not have to die. I disagree with that. For all that wind up, I want to. Sure. That's not my pitch. That's not what I think. This is the thing I want to point out. Okay, and I know, Jay, we've talked about our next book doing, the Odyssey, and I'm a huge fan of the Odyssey, as you know, and that lives enormously in my head. So I'll admit that prejudice up ahead. But do you know, Juliet visits the underworld like very few mythological characters do. And I really like this idea that Juliet's death is preceded by a visit to the underworld. That she, and it's back in 4.3, Act 4.3, where she's going through, but right before she drinks the vial that Friar Lawrence gives her, and she goes through all the options. We talked about this last episode, right? So it's an intellectual visit to the underworld, unlike Odysseus's magical.
Sure, like a geographical one.
Yeah, a geographical one, which is still weird because it's so magical. And how does that work? It doesn't totally make sense. But her killing herself in a very violent physical way is preceded by a psychological or a philosophical confrontation with death, from which she returns, very much like Odysseus. And after returning, she understands that is her proper place, and she returns to it forever, right?
Yeah.
So her death, I guess I want to say, is preceded by a visit to the underworld from which she returns, and it's a very different thing than Odysseus, than Romeo's drinking of the vial. I don't know. I want to draw. I want to pull some space between those two deaths.
I think that's good. I mean, you could teach an elective on characters who, whether it's Hamlet looking at the skull of his mentor, whether it's Odysseus in Hades, which is Scrooge looking at his grave, whether it's, you can go down the line,
Scrooge
right?
Is a great character for that.
So
that's right.
And to make it more human, what about students we have this year who have had families who have COVID, who they worry about that are going to die? I had a student whose grandmother had it. He thought he was going to lose her, and she survived. And he admitted the other day, like every time I get to talk to her, I'm really excited to talk with her because she was almost taken. And so it's like it's a very human reality.
It is. It's not purely mythological,
right? And as we know. The mythological I think just makes literary in broad strokes what's already human to begin with. So that impulse of like getting really close to death and surviving, trips to Hades is just Homer's way of talking about what my student just said.
Yeah, that's right.
And what you're saying, what you're saying, Juliet experienced a version of Odysseus experienced a version of.
I think it is, and Odysseus,
really good.
He got some kind of directions about how to get home, which is a weird way, and we'll talk about this when we do the Odyssey. But it's only really spiritual directions. They're not actual. Right. It's not what was promised by Circe. Actually, Circe gives him the directions home. Look out for the sirens. Look out for the sirens. He didn't get that from Tiresias. He got something else from the blind, from the blind poet, and I think it's striking that that Juliet has a spiritual Tiresian guide. I mean, Friar Lawrence takes her to the underworld in an equally mysterious way, right? It's almost that like what drug did he give her last Friday? What drug is that exactly? I don't know. It's magic. It's equally magic. But what isn't magic is her facing death. right? Confronting death in her own mind and choosing to be there. And then she was there. You have to picture her lying amongst the dead, and she's unconscious for it.
Right.
But before she goes into it, she knows she's going to be there.
Right.
She's going to spend some time there, and she might wake up in the pitch black dark by herself with Tiresias' rotting body.
Right.
Not to mention her other ancestors. So she's as good as conscious while she's there. Romeo, the closest he gets to that is banishment.
Which is why I'm wondering, and you're making me think of this in a different way, but that's why I'm wondering, man, what would it sound like in an earlier draft if Juliet wakes up and gets a page of thinking? You know what I mean? Gets a page of her. We get a page of her thinking about the fact that she didn't know if she was going to die forever. She didn't know if the potion was going to work. She doesn't know if Romeo's around. She looks around and there's the corpses of loved one. Does she have a childhood memory of Tybalt? Like, you could imagine an infinite number of imaginative possibilities. And I find it so weird. It's either a flaw or something else is going on, or it's like a weird moment of writer restraint. Maybe he needs to end the play. I don't know. I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. And Rome and in the end, I mean, I find Juliet's acceptance of death more heroic, than Romeo's. Because Romeo kills himself. It almost feels, it's almost unthinking and instinctual, which is fine. He feels the passion of love. And he says, I'm going to throw off fate, and I'll join my bride tonight. We'll spend another night together, an eternal night, together. And he takes it on, and there is a kind of bravery, I suppose. But there's no moment of well, I don't know. There is a long moment of reflection, I was going to say. But he hasn't really faced death. It seems like it's more, I don't know, more earthly than what Juliet than what Juliet has done. And though Juliet does this more quickly, she really doesn't have to die. And Friar Lawrence has a plan, right? He doesn't think she's going to kill herself. All right, he doesn't think, oh boy, when she sees him, he says he's got a plan. We'll take you to a nunnery. Like, we have a way to to fix this. He's moving forward, and then leaves the scene. Paris is dead. So we identified that last podcast as this driving force, is driving Juliet to violate her vow. She's not going to do that. Well, that's off the table, and she knows that.
Yep.
The dead body of Paris is laid in the tomb, according to Romeo's promise, beside his love, the whole reason he was there in the first place. So that's off the table. She can do that math. But for her, there's no question. There's no question that death is the option, and it is Romeo's avoidable death, I think you might say. If he had asked more questions, if he had been more reflective, that leads to Juliet's death. He dies with her. She dies with his knife. Right? She pulls his knife. The parents reflect on that afterwards. Oh, look at this! The knife made a mistake. It sought the wrong sheath. Right.
Right.
So
that's good.
So it is an avoidable. It is an avoidable death. As my students think, but I think it in the end it really isn't. She knows, and this is what I said for the obvious but essential too, is that Juliet knows the conditions under which life is not worth living anymore, and for true love, her true eternal singular love, which is Romeo, is gone, then she has to die. And the brave point is this, whether she's right about that or not, the brave point is this, is that she accepts it. Yep. This is the nature of reality. Yeah. This is the circumstance I'm in. Right. And I accept it, which means death, which means killing herself. So she's willing to take that on and to die.
My surprising point's related, so I don't think I have to go on and on about it, but I was wondering about the nature of the lover's doom, the nature of Romeo and Juliet's doom. I'm always interested in texts. I mean, Frankenstein has this, the Odyssey has this, Paradise Lost. You can go on the line of classic texts that make us think in ways differently than works of like philosophy or theology do. Makes us think about human agency and free will, and whether it's the will of the gods or some fate, some amorphous fate. So what's the nature of the lover's doom? And I can't help but to think that what I do know is the adult world they're a part of is full of rash judgments, long-standing hatreds, hasty decisions. The nurse making hasty decisions. Friar Lawrence quickly makes a potion even though he has other options. You have to marry Paris on Thursday. Like every decision seems to be this way.
That's right.
And maybe the only way to transcend the adult world they're a part of is to escape it. And we know as high school teachers and also as parents, there's a variety of healthy escapes and there's not healthy escapes. And their initial escape is love. And then ultimately, sadly, their escape is death.
Right.
And that I am endlessly interested in we read the prologue every day. We do this poem so they know it by heart by the end. And after we discuss Act 5, it's really weird to go back to talk about, which nothing or not is the word, but would nothing but their children's end bury their parents' strife. So it's just this really blunt, strike over the head that the only thing that can make these people stop fighting is the death of their kids.
Right.
So is that just fate? And if it's just fate and no choices matter, I just am not interested in opening the books. I think it's a little more complicated than that. But the adult world they're a part of is so adolescent, to be honest, in its impulsivity, rashness, inexplicable feelings.
Yes.
Why do you hate this family? It's been a long time.
Yeah.
Whatever. We've always hated those people.
Right.
So they're escaping, and unfortunately, their escape ends up becoming fatal ultimately. That's just something I noticed.
I like that, and it's a great balance. And by great, I mean a much truer balance between, a kind of individualism that you find in Romeo and Juliet that you appreciate, and you want to see in your students and your own kids. Yep. And the fact of the reality of the world within which their individualism exists. And you can't just by fiat decide, right, to have a life of a certain kind.
Right.
You may be born into a family situation
Sure.
in which, as you say, death, or as the prince says, what was that line? This bad luck that love, somehow you're only, what was that? Hate, death brought about the end of your of your family.
My only love sprung from my only hate. That's what Juliet says that about.
I was thinking actually of that heaven finds means to kill your joys with love.
Oh yeah,
that one.
You just want to say like, "Shut up, Prince."
Yeah.
Like if you're one of these people in the family, it's like, get out of here.
Yeah, come on. See what a scourge.
Can you give us a minute?
Yeah, like just one scene, maybe 5.4. You can come back and beat us up. You're just so smart. Right.
Just need a minute.
See what a scourge is laid upon your hate, that heaven finds means to kill your joys with love. And I for winking at he takes a little blame there.
Yeah,
I've lost a brace of kinsmen. All are punished.
Yeah. The kids love the accent over the E too.
Oh yeah,
the punish it.
Yeah,
you got to be punished.
Yes.
I told him when the bell rang one day at Romeo and Juliet, I told him, "You are dismissed." So I think 1.5 kids maybe laughed. But anyway.
Okay, well that's better than average. Well,
are we on nagging questions? The last.
Yeah, I think we're through to the nagging questions. I don't know. I feel a lot of. Do you really? Yeah, I feel a pressure to come up with a lot.
I have a short one that's fast.
All right.
And then one that I have no idea.
Okay. Yeah, let's do those. That's better than I have. I have to be honest.
Okay. So you'll want to wrestle with the last one. Friar Lawrence gets a bigger speech than Romeo or Juliet gets at the end on Act 5, Scene 3. And he outs himself, right? He maps out a little late because it's a high body count at this point.
Yeah, right.
And it's about 30 lines, about the length of the to be or not to be speech.
Okay.
That's a page of single space text where he maps out everything that he had calculated and planned.
Right.
Here's the prince's response. We still have known thee for a holy man.
Yeah.
That's it. No, that's literally it. And then he changes to where's Where's Balthazar? So my students and I had the longest conversation I've ever had about this. And one kid's like, well, maybe it's one of those situations where they just respect authority and authority can get away with stuff.
Okay.
But it doesn't take a lot of close reading to realize that has not gotten this community that far.
Okay.
So number one. So anyway, I just think that's weird and worth pointing out. My big question is one of my favorite nonfiction writers is Peter Ackroyd. He's a literary biographer, and his biography of Shakespeare, I think I told you about it, is arrogantly titled Shakespeare, the Biography, which is awesome.
Very nice.
You got to be good.
I love that.
Okay.
Yeah. Come out strong.
In there, I learned many things, and I took some notes. And one of the things he taught me was that at the end of every Elizabethan play, there'd be a dance.
Okay.
Which I didn't know.
No, I don't know that.
So I knew Will Kemp, who was Shakespeare's clown, who I think was still working for the company, and I wouldn't be surprised was Mercutio.
Okay.
Was known as like one of the best dancers, and there were people that paid to go see all these plays just to see him dance. Actually.
Okay.
So obviously, at the end of a comedy, that almost always ends with a wedding or some sort of romantic union. A dance makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of Hamlet, Macbeth, Lear, Othello, Romeo and Juliet, literally what would happen is there's no curtain. So bodies would rise.
Okay.
Hopefully applause. And a dance.
Right.
And Ackroyd makes the point that there was this sense that even in tragic representation, art is celebratory.
Yes.
So that's fascinating. So what I'm wondering is, does the final interchange between Montague and Capulet, the dads, leave room for hope and light? Or is something still sinister lurking? In other words, is there a little glimmer of hope at the very end of the play that would make the dance make sense?
Oh.
So by the very end of the play, if I can just read, it's not a lot of lines.
No, yeah, let's get that out.
Montague says in line 309, Act 5, Scene 3. Let's see. Well, Capulet, I'm sorry, line 306 says, "Oh, brother Montague."
Yeah.
Language has changed since they have dead kids now.
Right.
"Give me thy hand. This is my daughter's jointure. This is like the dowry I would have given you. Mm-hmm. But all I have is my connection, my kindness. For no more can I demand." Montague, "But I can give thee more, for I will ray her statue." And so Romeo's dad says, "I'm going to build a gold statue to Juliet." And you're a Bible guy, Paul. How do gold statues usually go? Pretty good?
No.
Yeah,
not at all.
So that's weird.
Yeah.
That while Verona by that name is known, there shall no figure at such rate be set as that of true and faithful Juliet. And Capulet's response, "As rich shall Romeo's statue by his ladies lie, poor sacrifices to our enmity." Okay, I'm going to shake your hand. I'm going to build a statue. Oh, yeah? Well, I'm going to build a statue. And then the prince comes out and says, "Never was there story of more woe." And we end the play and everybody's sad. So my nagging question is there hope for Verona at the end of the play?
I'm going to answer that.
Oh, good. That makes my life I can talk to you more.
Do you have a pen? You want to write this down?
I'm the nerd. I got multiple colors. What color do you want?
Answer equals no. Yeah.
Yeah. So no.
That's your suspicion, I'm sure, isn't it, Jay?
I don't know. I think you're right.
All right.
But go ahead. Tell me what you think.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't believe it. Yeah, I think what you've emphasized of this one-upsmanship, if we had left it at the handship of the handshake of fellowship.
Yeah.
Maybe I might be
And then the
swayed.
prince comes in, done.
Yeah, we're done. We're fine.
You know.
But a gold statue, no, a bigger gold statue.
Right.
That's not at all what happened. That doesn't represent in any way what happened. That's not what Juliet wanted. That's not what Romeo wanted.
Well, to me, that's the underbelly of this. And I'm sorry to mention Hamlet off and on through the reading of Romeo and Juliet. It's just I was just teaching it. I know you're teaching it now. You're seniors.
I'm in it.
I'm just fascinated by, when a tragedy happens, I think there's layers of what a tragedy means. And there's a deeper, darker tragedy when no one knows what the hell just happened and will never report it.
Yeah.
So the whole, Horatio saying I'm more antique Roman than a Dane, maybe there's some liquor left, and the only guy that could report Hamlet's story is about to kill himself, but he stops.
Right.
And say we want about Horatio, but he can report some version of Hamlet's story. We might, hopefully we get to do Hamlet together.
Yeah.
That'll be a conversation, but I mean, he doesn't die, and there's some glimmer of hope on that level.
Right. But what story can Horatio tell? None of us can tell the full story of Hamlet.
But does anybody at the end of Romeo and Juliet have any conception of these? Is there any sense that Friar Lawrence is going to come clean in terms of the inner lives of these two kids? No.
There's only two people that have the possibility. The nurse, that's laughable.
Right.
And then Friar Lawrence, no.
Right.
No.
So maybe there's another level of tragedy in that, the fighting for love, the fighting against all odds, the beautiful poetry, the eloping, everything that happens, that they fight for their agency and they fight for being together, that another layer of tragedy isn't simply that they died, but that no one will know why.
Yeah. Yeah.
Except for us in this podcast, which is another reason why we're here.
Exactly. I was going to reach out. I was going to say, you have to reach outside of the story. The only hope is outside of this. Is not, it can't be for anyone in Verona or even far distant Mantua. That's like death itself. Boy, wouldn't you hate to have lived in Mantua? Man, that must have been a
well, they have the plague, so that's the whole problem.
Horrible. It's like plague there all the time. Yeah. But so it can't be for them. It has to be for us.
Yep.
And it's momentarily, briefly, but uselessly for the main characters. It's not like Oedipus that wanders along for the rest of his life.
Sure.
And has the benefit of this great insight. They don't. Their insight appears in the sepulcher and ends there too. So it's for us. No. Their fathers are continuing to be themselves. I think, the men that got them where they are. And that's wonderful. And I have no doubt they will build those gold statues. Their words are not empty in that sense. They will have their golden calf, at the bottom of Mount Sinai. But the word from God that they just received.
Deaf to.
No.
Yeah, they're deaf to that.
Yes. Yeah, they are. They are deaf to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. There's a lot of lingering questions. As you say,
it's funny that this is the play. Like, we teach freshmen, and we talk to people that teach. Folks that are listening to this, please comment. What you're teaching and how this is going. We want to interact with you. But I get on many levels why this is what's taught to ninth-ish graders. That's the age group of the main characters, and maybe on that superficial level. On the other hand, there's so many things that seem like wildly out of place for the 14-year-old mind, but I don't know.
Right.
But you and I know, and I'm sure people listening, this book does occasion some amazing conversations with kids.
It's fantastic. I toyed with that of playing some audio in the podcast. I have audio, it's treasured audio, from a teacher's perspective of students fighting, about this play. And I have to say, I have to go back to the thing I mentioned, as a suggestion. They can get really worked up about the role of fate in this, like in that point about whether Juliet had to die or not, whether they both had to die. I find that a point that successfully is provocative to them. And it's one you might try out, because there are so many angles for students to come in, to that, from, and they're interested in free choice and free will and making their own lives and being who they are and identity. Those are all easy on-ramps, into the story. Sure. And they despise this idea that there's some greater power over them, some fate, like Friar Lawrence mentions, like Romeo mentions. Yeah. That's controlling their lives. They chafe against that, rightfully so.
Paul, do you remember, this is connected to what you're just saying. Imagine if you were born in any, I don't know what kind of neighborhood you grew up in, but if there was a neighbor's home with maybe greater challenges than your family had, say.
Definitely were.
Right. So me too. The neighbor to my left growing up had a substance abuse issue and was not a good guy.
Yeah.
Right?
As you face the house or as you're in the house?
As I'm in the house to the left.
Okay.
Facing the house to the right. He's probably not listening to this, so I feel safe. I don't think he was a bad person. He had a substance challenge.
Yeah.
And that, obviously does things to a family. And I often tell students, if I was born in that house, like 15 feet to the left, I'm not your teacher, and it's a whole different set of dominoes. So, you know, it isn't a philosophy text. It's a work of literature. But I think to enter into it and to enter into the complicated minds and hearts of the characters and all the things they're wrestling with, to put yourself in a place just to be humble enough to realize so much of who I am has nothing to do with anything I did. It was just, my mother is my mother. I didn't choose that on a Thursday. My father's my father. Yes. The house was my house, my siblings, my, you know, opportunities along the way. So
yes,
this book occasions some of that, and it's messy.
Yeah, it's
in a way that I think helps kids grow up in a way.
I think so too.
As readers, you know,
because Shakespeare, this may sound hokey, but bravely pitted against exactly what you're saying. Some powerful characters. Juliet, I think, as we've said in many different ways, is a powerful character. So you think, oh, well, the circumstance of my birth, I would get over that. Okay, yes and no. I mean, Juliet and Romeo did not try to kill each other, you know, in the manner of their parents. So I guess they got over it to some degree. But in the end, I mean, the prince's last words, finally, you know, all are punished because look what you guys did. Yeah. You know, and he jumps right to it. Where are you going to lay the blame? He doesn't blame fate. He doesn't blame Friar Lawrence even, really, although somebody's going to get some jail time, it sounds like. He says, we'll figure it out later. But he goes right to it. It's like this historic, you know, family thing. Look what your hate has wrought. It's your fault. You know, it's this thing that that you've coddled all these years. Yeah, the family to the left of my house. Same thing you're talking about. Yes, as you face the house. So I guess it's on the other side. Yeah. But I was friends with the kids, 3 kids, parent, serious problems, you know, that same way. Totally shaped their lives. We were really different. Economically, kind of the same, you know, and these other markers. But there was this other, you know, part of their lives, and their lives had been different. You know, but when we knew them, when we moved to that neighborhood, things had fallen down, several rungs, you know, in many different ways. It's a good point, and what's good about it is that there are points of access for the students into the story, and then when they get there, there's no pulling the rug out from under their feet. Like it can go as far as any of your students can go, you know, and of course much further. So it's nice.
No, it's awesome. This was really good. Thanks for the chat.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the chat too. It's good to hear what you've done.
Definitely comment those who are listening.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
Comment on points that maybe were helpful. Points, you know, feel free to disagree. Right. I always quote my father. I thought I was wrong once, but I made a mistake.
Right.
You know, we're high school teachers doing the best we can. We love talking about this stuff, so we'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, how this touches down. Absolutely. And this is the first book, Jay. It's kind of nice to get through.
What's on deck?
Well, I think we need something in between. So we'll do a little palate cleanser in between. I've got a couple ideas for that. Yep. And then I want to jump in before the summer begins. I want to jump into the Odyssey. We both. Yeah, we spent a lot of years in that, and that is a book that can be taught very early on. 9th graders can read that book and like appreciably.
Sure.
And not only can they, but I really think they should be. You know,
my guys were on book 13 today, and Odysseus made it home, but it's not good.
Yeah,
just so you know, if you're wondering,
it's ugly over there.
He's home, but he's not really home.
Wow, I'm just glad he didn't die on his way home. It took
forever.
Know.
Maybe next year. Yeah, you know, it depends on what edition you get. Yeah, that'll be good. We'll take our time through that because I think that's in a lot of curricula.
Yeah, I think it's common. I think it's sampled more than it's read, and we can talk about that. But I think that'll
be great.
Putting the time.
That'll be great.
All right, Jay. Hey, thanks again.
Thanks,
Good to chat. Yeah, see you next time.
See you next time.
All right.